Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today we're going to be going through the iPhones Apple is currently selling and determining which one is right for you. Timestamps for each iPhone in the description, and if you're interested in the used market, I'll be making a completely different buying guide for that, so that'll be linked at the top of the description as soon as it's out. But we're going to start with the newest and very expensive iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, and make our way down to the third generation iPhone SE that released in early 2022. And I'll give my overall thoughts and recommendations based on your price point, because of course with this sort of thing, no one size fits all. I'm also going to touch on the refurbished options Apple themselves are selling, as it might be of interest for some out there. We're going to also be using just the base American dollar amounts, and depending on your country or if you're buying through a carrier, your pricing could look very different, but the relative value proposition likely will stay about the same. And to give you the answers immediately as concisely as possible, the iPhone 14 Pro or Pro Max are for those with money to burn. The iPhone 14 Plus is a good option if you don't care so much about the Pro features, but want a big, slightly cheaper iPhone with great battery life, and the iPhone 13 is the best option for most people as it rides the line between mid-range and high-end. The 13 mini, specifically, is for those who really want small phones. Otherwise, you're going to want the 13. The iPhone 12 at the same price as the 13 mini should never be bought when the 13 is only $100 more. What Apple doesn't make obvious is that while the 12 is $100 less, it also only has 64 gigabytes of storage, whereas the 13 has 128. So for that extra 100, you're not only getting a year newer phone with better cameras and battery life, but double the storage as well. Then at $430, the iPhone SE is really not going to be worth buying for the vast majority out there, as it's overpriced for a budget phone and is lacking in the battery life and camera departments, though it's still a very solid phone regardless of the old design. If it was about $300, I'd be a lot more open to it, but as it stands right now, the only way I would get this phone is if you're absolutely 100% set on keeping the home button. And you might be able to find the iPhone 11 still being sold as stores clear it out. That would definitely be worth it as well. And so right off the gate, there's my recommendations. And honestly, you could probably stop watching here, but if you want more details about the specific phone you're looking at, we're going to go through all of those. This won't be too in-depth. These aren't reviews. I'll link reviews I do have in the description below. And so we begin with the iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. What is there even to say? The best of the best, but you need to pay an arm, a leg, 2 kidneys, and 13 gold teeth to actually buy them. The iPhone 14 Pro starts at $999 and the Pro Max at $1099. It might seem a bit ludicrous, and it's for that reason that as good as these phones are, they're not going to be the device for most people. Only if you're getting a heck of a deal through your carrier, or just have the type of money to spend on this sort of thing, should you get it. That being said, these are fantastic phones, and they're a decent upgrade, particularly in the camera department. What the 14 Pro has over the lower tier phones comes down to a couple major things. The biggest for most will be the third camera lens on the back that offers 3x zoom. Along with the all-new 48 megapixel main sensor, you get 4 different ranges without loss in quality: 0.5, 1, 2, and 3x zooms. The selfie camera also has seen some improvements, and yes, the notch is different. I don't think most people are really gonna care, but it does have some fancy animations if you're into that. It'll definitely feel cool until the novelty wears off. And if you are really into taking a lot of photos and videos, by the way, especially if you're going to RAW, you're gonna wanna get the 256 gig 14 Pro, as the 128 doesn't support shooting RAW in 4K, and the extra space is just nice to have in general, even with iCloud storage. So the camera is improved, and the other big difference maker to me is going to be the display. It doesn't look a whole lot different on the surface, but like the 13 Pro, we get ProMotion, which gives a 120 Hz refresh rate. And if you don't know what that is off the top of your head, you probably don't have to worry about it, but basically it makes the whole phone feel smoother. If you go to a store with these phones on display and just swipe around a little bit, you'll see the difference right away. It adds a lot to the experience, but practically speaking, it doesn't really do much except look nice unless you're really into mobile gaming. And so the camera and that display are the two biggest things when it comes to the 14 Pro over the iPhone 14. Besides this, there are some minor things as well. You get the A16 Bionic chipset instead of the A15, so it's technically faster. You're just not going to see much of a difference yet in real life use, because honestly, Apple's chipsets have been ridiculously fast for years now. The 14 Pro also has an always-on display that's not on the 14, so the display always is able to show the clock and some basic info, so if that's something you're interested in, 14 Pro is the way to go. Oh, and when it comes to which size to get, honestly, just get the one you'd prefer. It's down to personal preference, and there's no real inherent benefits in getting the Max besides better battery life, thanks to the battery itself being physically larger. That being said, the battery life on either phone is going to be really good. And this also applies to the next phones on the chopping block, the iPhone 14 and iPhone 14 Plus. Really good phones, even if they lack some of the features the more expensive Pro brings to the table. The 14 will run you $800 and the 14 Plus $900. And this sounds like a lot, and that's because it is, but it is Apple. And the screen size here is important because in previous years, if you wanted the biggest iPhone, you had to get the Pro option. This year you don't. The 14 Plus is the same size as the Max, and it's $200 cheaper. Now, $200 isn't a small amount of money, and it equals about 22% of the price of the 14 Plus. But for me, adding that 22% would be worth it for the camera alone on the 14 Pro Max, never mind the ProMotion display, faster chipset, new notch design, and so on and so forth. The 14 Plus and 14 right now I just think are a little bit too expensive. I think if you knocked them down an extra $100, they would be easily the obvious buy, but Apple's not going to do that. So for most people, for the first time since they started doing these Pro phones, I'm actually going to recommend you pay the extra $200 and get the Pro. I think the camera upgrades alone are worth it. That being said, if you don't care about any of those improvements and just want a big new iPhone, the iPhone 14 Plus is going to be great. I would just generally recommend going to the Pro Max. We'll get to the smaller 14's value in a moment. So what does the iPhone 14 have over the 13? Well, the cameras might not be a whole lot different, but the camera sensor itself is physically larger, which means significantly better low light quality photos. And mind you, the 13 wasn't even bad to begin with, so it's even better here. Battery life is great. It was good on the 13, but it's even better here. The 14 and 14 Plus are slightly faster than the iPhone 13. They have the A15 chip, but it's the one that was found in the 13 Pro, so it's about 18% faster according to Apple. So it's a little faster, but by a negligible amount. You would never notice the difference in real life use. Again, you got that upgraded selfie camera when it comes to low light, and beyond that, it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot the 14 brings over the 13. And so it's for that reason I'm gonna say that while the 14 Plus is worth buying for the right kind of person, someone who wants to save just a little bit of money from the 14 Pro Max and just doesn't care about what the Pro Max has, 14 Plus worth it. iPhone 14, I would just save $100 and go for the 13, to be honest. They're both 128 gigs. The 13 is 700, the 14 is 800, and the 14, the biggest improvement, better low light photos. If that's important to you, absolutely by all means spend the extra money, but I think for the vast majority out there, the iPhone 13 is going to be the more tempting option. And so if we go further, this brings us to the iPhone 13 as well as the iPhone 13 mini, and one half of this is going to be very simple. The iPhone 13 mini has a small display, a very small display. It is 5.4 inches. Now that might not sound too bad, but it's about the size of one of those old iPhone 5s or 5S's, SEs, just with an edge-to-edge display. So it's very, very small. This is an iPhone 12 mini, but you get the idea. They're no longer selling the 12 mini, by the way, and that's why the 13 mini is the absolute best small phone you can buy on the market right now, not just with iPhones, but any smartphone whatsoever. This is the best compact phone out there, and so if you like small phones, there really is no question, buy the iPhone 13 mini. That's $600 with 128 gigs of storage and actually pretty good battery life, especially considering the size. It's a no-brainer. Do not get the 13 mini in order to save money from the iPhone 13. This is a very small phone. You will probably regret it. Only get it if you specifically want that small size. Now the iPhone 13, same size as the iPhone 14, the iPhone 14 Pro, and the iPhone 12. We've talked about what the 14 brought over the 13, and it's still a very solid phone. It has the A15 chipset, the cameras are fantastic. You get the main 12 megapixel wide lens and the 12 megapixel ultra wide lens. There's a lot to love with the iPhone 13, and at 128 gigs, it is $700. Now what I like about this phone especially is not only is it a great phone, I think it's at an ideal size for most people, and I actually think $700 is decent value for it, but it's also much better value than the iPhone 12, at least in my opinion. So if we go to the iPhone 12, the problem with the iPhone 12, as mentioned in the beginning, is that it's $600 and only has 64 gigabytes of storage. So for $100 more, you get the 13 with 128, and if you want 128 gigs on the 12, you're going to $650. So really, for $50 with the same amount of storage, you're getting an upgraded camera, smaller notch, and all the other classic upgrades. In short, don't buy the iPhone 12. It's not worth the money when the 13 is $100 more with double the storage, and is just going to be a better phone in general. And that brings us to the final iPhone Apple is still selling, the third generation iPhone SE from early 2022. This is a weird phone, and it's at the price of $430 American dollars, which I don't like. It's too much money for what it is. The only reason you should buy the iPhone SE is if you really desperately want that home button, maybe for a senior or someone who's just not ready to move on. If that's you, fair enough. This is the best phone you'll ever be able to buy. It is extremely unlikely Apple brings this design back, and it is fast. It also has the A15 Bionic chipset, the same as in the 13, which means it is going to get years and years of support. It has Touch ID on the home button, which is very solid. The display itself isn't as nice or vibrant as the other phones, but if you're buying the SE, you probably don't care about that. Basically, this is a super overpowered small phone with very limited hardware. My biggest issue with it, besides the price point, is the camera. It has the same camera sensor as the iPhone 8 from 2017. That's 5 years ago. Now, with more power, better performance, the pictures from it don't look like they're from on the iPhone 8. They're actually quite impressive. It's definitely not a bad camera until you get into low light situations. There's no night mode on this phone, and low light situations in general, even when you wouldn't be triggering night mode, the iPhone 11 and above are just going to blow it away. So the iPhone SE only get if you really like that home button. If you like small phones, the 13 mini is worth the extra $170. And so that is what Apple is currently selling. Now I quickly want to talk about something I haven't really talked about before, and that's Apple's refurbished offerings for iPhones. Refurbished. So what refurbished is, typically they're devices that have been returned. If they were broken, Apple fixed them, replaced the display, the battery. They could have minor scratches on the body itself, but generally speaking, from Apple, these are almost brand new. I've never had a problem with buying refurbished. So if you want to find the refurbished section for apple.com, if you scroll down to the bottom, under Apple Store, you can see refurbished and clearance. If you click that, this is where they sell their older devices and a lot of current devices as well. What's cool here is they're actually selling the iPhone 11, or at least they were. This is the Wayback Machine from September 12th. When I was recording this, it was a different iPhone 11. And as of when I'm recording this right now, they don't have any iPhone 11. It's just 11 Pros and 12 Pros. But this deal here is insane. $429 is the same price as the SE3. So you do need to pay attention if you want a refurbished phone, because the turnover rate is very high. Apple basically sells them as they get them. But something like an iPhone 11 for the same price as an SE is a comparatively fantastic deal. And honestly, I like these deals too. And so if you're interested in saving a little bit of money, but would rather still buy from Apple, certified refurbished is a good way to go. But with that all being said, I think we're pretty much about done here. The best overall iPhone for most people right now is going to be the iPhone 13. If you want a small phone, 13 mini, but for most, the 13 is the way to go. If you want one of the new iPhones, I would say the 14 Pro is worth the extra money to get the newer camera and the better display. Normally, I don't recommend that. This year, the prices are high enough that I'm comfortable doing so. So that's my opinion. I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below, and whether or not you're going to be buying any of these phones. Hope this video helped you out, and if it did, maybe hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content just like this. Again, my buying guide for used iPhones, as soon as that's out, will be linked in the description. So with that all being said, thank you so much for watching. Sorry my voice might sound a bit off. I am sick, but that's all right. I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.